Hello again, and thank you so much for tuning into Everyday Choices Part 2, the second and final event of today. My name is Marketa Benisek, and I'll be your host today. I'm a certified climate reality leader and a partnership manager at a marketing agency called Footprint Digital. I know that some of you signed up for both events, Part 1 and Part 2, so if you're one of them, thank you so much for joining us again. Also, feel free to use the chat if you have any questions or comments. We'll be trying to answer them as we go along. And please scan the QR code up here. It will take you directly to 24hoursofreality.org, where you can fill a very short form to plant your tree as a thank you for your interest and your time today. In the next hour or so, you're going to hear from 8 speakers, including me, about climate change and how we can contribute individually to solving the climate crisis. This is a one-of-a-kind presentation. I've never done anything like this before, other than obviously the first event, and I'm really grateful to introduce to you an amazing group of people who decided to join me for this event. I'm also really thankful for all the support from my team at Footprint Digital and the whole Climate Reality project, because they've made this whole thing possible, and I'm very proud to be part of this global initiative. The purpose of this presentation is not only to help you understand climate change, but also to hopefully make you feel inspired and make you feel like you can make a difference in your personal life and in your community and at work. Because as Greta said, no one is too small to make a difference, and we need each and every one of you to solve this global crisis. The majority of time today we're going to be talking about the solutions. Climate change is scary and it's a very heavy topic, and it may sometimes feel too big to deal with. And we do need support from our governments and achieve systemic change and green recovery, as we will slowly be, hopefully sooner rather than later, getting out of the global pandemic. But until we get there, we can only do what we can do, starting with our individual actions, our everyday choices. Before we begin, here are a few words from the Climate Reality founder and chairman, Al Gore.
Hello, everyone. I'm Al Gore, and I want to thank you for joining us today for 24 Hours of Reality Countdown to the Future. As all of you know, we're living through truly extraordinary times, and if you're like most people, you look at these challenges that we're facing now, the climate crisis getting worse, the COVID-19 pandemic, structural and institutional racism, the challenges to the operations of democracy, and you ask yourself, what can we do? How do we overcome these truly existential threats that are connected, and how do we build together the sustainable future and the just and fair future that we want and deserve? Well, the presentation you're about to hear and the discussion you're about to join is about these questions. Your host is an incredible climate reality leader that I personally have worked with. And through their presentation, you'll learn the science behind the climate crisis and why it is having such a devastating impact on the ecological balance of our planet. You'll also learn how the climate crisis is connected to the COVID-19 pandemic and is connected to the broader injustices and inequities, not only in the US, where I'm located, but in places all around the planet. Just as important, you'll learn that we have the solutions, and you'll learn how we can work together to solve these crises, starting with a green recovery and with a just transition to clean energy and the technologies that can make our world better in every way. You'll learn what you personally can do to make a difference and to help us create the future that we want and that humanity deserves. So before I hand you back to your host, I want to say one other thing. Thank you for being a part of this global conversation. The truth of our circumstances is very clear. We have to solve the climate crisis, and we have the solutions we need today. I know that we can solve the climate crisis. We have the political will. You know it's a renewable resource, but it's really because of people like you who are ready to commit the time and energy and attention and stand up and fight for a better world. Because of you, I know that we will succeed. Thank you.
Now you're going to hear from our speakers. They're going to share with you their personal stories and the solutions to climate change that can be applied at an individual level. First up, we have Christiaan Maats. Christiaan is an award-winning batch product designer, entrepreneur, and educator. In 2008, he created oat shoes, the world's first 100% biodegradable shoes that you can use to grow plants. After 7 years of pioneering the field of sustainable footwear, he now helps entrepreneurs and businesses accelerate sustainable innovation. He currently works as a sustainability director at DFNS Care Products and works closely with open innovation agency Norderwind and circular business Kickstarter Circo. He is also a teacher and business coach, and in 2017 he delivered a TED Talk at University of Groningen on storytelling through product design. And today he's going to talk to us about how the transformation of society begins with individuals.
Climate change is stressing me out. Is it stressing you out? Because it is stressful, you know. We've got rising temperatures, rising sea levels, we got rising amounts of forest fires, we got floods and droughts and plastic in the ocean, mass extinction, climate migration, and then there's the rich-poor divide that's increasing, all kinds of inequality, and social media is pulling our social fabric apart. It seems like only a small amount of people is really working on the problem. It feels like every decision we make has major consequences, and it is up to us, you and me, to maximize our positive impact and reach those goals. Limit temperature increase to 2 degrees, eliminate plastic waste, reduce meat intake, stop flying, buy smarter, shower shorter, reduce phone use, and think of smart ideas that are going to change the world for the better and save humankind. It's like each one of us needs to be a superhero fighting to save us all. It's overwhelming. No wonder some people are denying the problem even exists. I mean, it's too big to deal with. But what if I told you all those things I just mentioned aren't the most fundamental problem? And what if I told you the remedy to that problem isn't to take action, but to slow down? You think I'm mad? I mean, if we don't take action, who will, right? I mean, isn't anybody that's capable, responsible to do everything they can to save humankind? Shouldn't we sacrifice some comfort, some well-being for the greater good? Isn't that what superheroes do? But what if I told you it's that kind of thinking that's got us into this mess in the first place? Have I lost you? Well, think about it. We've grown up with the idea that we can achieve anything we want as long as we put our minds to it. If you take the right action, you get the rewards. It's ingrained so deeply in our culture that we seem to take it for granted. Don't sin, go to heaven. Study hard, get good grades. Work well, get a bonus. Be smart, get ahead. Action, reward, action, reward. And we celebrate the individuals who make it against all odds, the heroes of business and sports and politics. People who embody the story of success that we have. It's like saying, if you just do enough, maybe one day you will be enough. But there's a flip side to this. Because what happens if you don't make it, right? If you don't achieve all those ambitions you had? Well, then you just didn't work hard enough, right? You weren't smart enough. You failed. You failed. So what do? Well, you work harder, right? Be smarter. Action, reward. Action, reward. Meanwhile, burnout rates and depression rates are at an all-time high, and we don't seem to be finding any solutions for them. I could have done that, work harder, be smarter. 12 years ago, I started a company that was going to revolutionize the footwear industry. We made the world's first biodegradable shoes that bloom. Yes, sneakers that grow flowers. We developed them, we marketed them, we won prizes, we got orders, but we also hit some snags. And after about 5 years of putting everything we could into that business, it went bankrupt. We failed. I failed. This whole big vision of changing the world failed. After the company was gone, I was exhausted. And in the months that followed, I tried to piece together where I'd lost it. I mean, this had been my dream. After a while, I realized I'd been so obsessed with this grand ambition on achieving those goals, being a hero, that I lost touch with my inner creative drive. I got carried away by how our society views success. I mean, this is what working for status and prizes and promotions are all about. This is what hero worship is all about. Action, reward. But science tells us that this idea really doesn't work. Too much action reward leads to more stress and less enthusiasm for the job you're doing. We do better work and enjoy our work more when we're intrinsically motivated. So we need to stay in touch with our inner drive and keep our egos in check. But how? Well, if you have a car, you know you have to maintain it, right? You have to clean it out every now and then, bring it to the garage for a tune-up, check the engine, check the brakes, everything's working in order. Same with our bodies. We exercise, we go swimming or running or playing football, whatever. We eat healthy. And then when we feel like something's wrong, we go to a doctor and we see if he can fix us. Well, when was the last time you took care of your emotional well-being? We run our intellectual minds in overdrive, chasing goals and saying, don't let your emotions get in the way, or I'm a professional, I work hard, or whatever other socially accepted mantra we can think of to prove that we're worthy. And in the meantime, we ignore our feelings. In our efforts to ignore negative emotions, we distract ourselves. We work, we binge watch, we party, drink, buy stuff, we get lost in social media, we get angry at the people in traffic, and we blame our emotional response to their actions. Anything not to feel the discomfort within ourselves. Do you keep driving your car when the wheels come off or keep running when your leg's broken? Well, why do we keep working with a broken head? If we're mindful of our physical fitness, why aren't we mindful of our emotional fitness? And doing that is all about self-empathy, allowing yourself to feel, to welcome your emotion, and allow yourself to feel stressed, insecure, angry, frustrated, or sad. Giving it space, charge the battery. There are many ways to do that. You can meditate or write or take walks, go to therapy, talk to a good friend. It all starts with one step. Slow down and open up to what's in front of you. When you feel annoyed in traffic, slow down, look around, enjoy the view. When you're eating, take time to savor the textures and the flavors and aromas. Make time to take a stroll and take in the sunlight sifting through the trees or feel the breeze on your skin. And enjoy a cup of coffee without looking at your phone. Do you know that feeling at the end of a relaxing 2-week vacation? After the first week, you're like, I'm so glad I have another week. But then towards the end of the second week, you start feeling the energy coming back, the feeling you want to, get going, start doing things again until you think about the pile of emails waiting for you when you get back. Well, that feeling right before the pile of emails, that's the feeling you're looking for. You feel good, you feel energized, you feel creative, balanced, ready to go. And slowing down and connecting to your inner drive helps you to keep that feeling alive and keeps you from being dragged into this action-reward roller coaster. It helps you to set boundaries and stay emotionally fit. And once you get the hang of that, there's less stress about what needs to be done and more doing what you want to get done. You have more headspace to connect to friends and family. You'll take time to enjoy a good meal, instead of those processed foods in plastic. Maybe you even start cooking. You'll enjoy a relaxing walk near your home instead of having to fly somewhere to relax. You'll buy with intent, not impulse. And when something breaks, you'll get it repaired so it'll last longer. You'll be open to the people you meet in life for who they are, not what they represent. And you'll start shifting towards more purposeful work that you enjoy doing. And you'll be better at doing it. In other words, you'll consume less, you'll waste less, and you contribute more. So remember all those stressful goals and having to save the world? Slow down, save yourself, and you'll save the planet.
Thanks, Christiaan. That was great. Next up, we have Ana Maria Leonte, who is going to talk to us about what decluttering can teach us about sustainability. Ana Maria is a fintech professional and a climate reality leader. She spent a lot of time reflecting on the climate realities we are now all accustomed to and how decluttering our digital lives can make a very positive personal impact as well as an environmental one. Ana Maria, over to you.
Thank you, Marketa, for the introduction. Good evening, everyone. My name is Ana Maria Leonte, indeed a fintech professional and a climate reality leader. Also a local of London for over a decade now, having moved here from Transylvania, where throughout my entire childhood, that would be for almost 14 years, I lived in a self-sustainable way thanks to my grandparents. What does that mean? That means that everything was sourced locally. As you can imagine, there was no supermarket food, no plastic, and no computers. Here in the background, you can see our back garden. It was a source of food for our animals and medicinal plants for us. As you may have gathered by now, my surname, Leonte, is of Latin origin. And I would like to open today's discussion with a Latin quote that I thought is pertinent for today's topic, which is digital clutter and our obsession with things. It goes like this: Vi totum vult, totum perdit. Or translated, he who has everything loses everything. He who has everything loses everything. Now, I think it's easy if we take a moment and look around us. We will notice that we have everything we want, yet we're losing everything we have. We're losing our wildlife, we're losing our air, and we're losing our future. I have 8 minutes today, and I would love to inspire you all to declutter your digital life. So how are we going to do that? Some may say the best is to lead by example, so I will try to do that and share my experience with you. This year, I reflected on the way I used to live as a child in Transylvania and the way I live now here as an adult. And I know you may think, is there even a digital world in Transylvania? Yes, there is one now, but no, there wasn't one when I was a child. And please allow me to explain even further. Here in this picture, you can see the type of places we would go on our summer holiday. We would be always outdoors, always in movement, always free. Who doesn't remember their 3-month summer holiday? We don't have that now anymore. We're adults now. That was then as a child in Transylvania, and 2 years ago in London, I realized my life was exactly at the opposite pole of that, which means I was living life through the medium of a screen, right? That usually tends to happen due to 2 things. One is work, and secondly is beloved people with whom we still want to keep in touch, but who are still far away. Now, you may say to a certain extent that is normal to happen, right? Especially given the transition from Transylvania to London. Yes, but only to a certain extent. I think actually we have gotten used to digital pollution exactly in the same way we have gotten used to air pollution. We don't notice it anymore. And I think it's important for us to not to allow for that to happen anymore. So, why did I do this here in terms of decluttering my digital world? As you can imagine, this has been on my mind for quite some time. I tried and failed, tried again, and in doing so, I took a social media break in order to reduce the carbon footprint generated through the cloud in terms of social media consumption. I took a break from Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And in doing so, I used this gadget. And no, you don't have to be as extreme as me. You can simply you can simply remove the apps you have downloaded into your phone. That is, if it works. On a personal level, I noticed the results were great. I had more time to spend with people I love, more time to be outdoors, more time to spend on my hobbies. However, this entire experience also made me think about our digital carbon footprint. It's far much bigger, far more complex than our ability to grasp, especially the one generated from video or sound streaming and the impact it has on our communities. Now, what do I want to say by that? If you were to live with us, you knew by now that we love South American songs. Lambada, I learned to dance it when I was 5 years old, and we listened to Despacito. And if you too are like me, I know you have listened to Despacito at least once in a year. Now, did you know Despacito too has a major carbon footprint? I didn't know that either. I mean, don't you think for a moment I had very sudden remorse and very deep remorse while listening to the song? To a certain extent, it's not as if you think about it, mid-chocolate, someone ever stops to think, I wonder how many calories this chocolate has. No one does that. You finish your chocolate, in this case listening to Despacito, and then when you do research, you find out that according to Fortune magazine, Despacito video, when it reached 5 billion views on YouTube, it consumed the same amount of energy as 40,000 US homes in a year. 40,000 US homes in a year for a little song like Despacito. Now, the biggest key takeaway for me has been to listen to music by downloading it on my phone, so not to use the cloud anymore. I have also gone as far as not using my smartphone cloud anymore. And I know we all think about the cloud as this infinite space because of its name, but we all know it's far from that. The cloud is far from infinite, it's very much a physical space. Now, this has been my journey in terms of decluttering my own digital life, and while far from perfect, and I know it's far from perfect, and yes, it's never going to be the same as my grandparents lived in Transylvania, which means computer free, and yes, not even this device, not even these smartphones, right? But overall, I think perhaps it's an experience we can all reflect on a little bit and inspires us all to think what are the next steps we want to take. I would like to end by sharing with you our back garden again. My grandparents are my legacy and my source of inspiration. And I would like you to take a moment and to look around you and think, what is your source of inspiration? If you found it, and you would like to join me on this journey of decluttering your digital life, please be sure to drop me a line on LinkedIn. Ana Maria Leonte is my name. And yes, remember the Despacito video story, yeah? Not too many messages, so we don't pollute in the same amount. Thank you, everyone. Marketa, over to you.
Thanks, Ana Maria. Our next speaker is Neil Clark. Neil works as a service design lead at Manifesto. As an employee of the digital industry, Neil is raising awareness of its environmental impact. He's working on products and services which help reduce that impact. He also calls himself as the annoying environmental person at work, and as such, Neil is leading on what the company needs to do for the planet, not to just meet the bare minimum. Today, Neil is going to talk to us about the environmental impact of the digital industry.
So why do I care about the environmental impact of the digital industry? Mainly because it's significant. The digital industry is responsible for about 2% of global emissions, which puts it on a par with the aviation industry. It's growing massively and isn't discussed nearly enough. However, I also care because it's what I have most agency over. I've made personal choices about my diet, about how my house is powered, about where I keep my money, but my biggest influence is going to be where I work for 40 plus hours a week. To illustrate that, there was a developer called Danny Van Kooten who recently rewrote a piece of code that he had written to connect two pieces of software. He shaved off a really tiny amount of weight from that code, but because of how much it's used on various websites and by various different companies, he cut emissions per month by more than the equivalent of 23 flights from London to Sydney. So everything you see when you're browsing a website or scrolling through an app is delivered by the transfer of data. That data transfer is powered by electricity, and despite great improvements in terms of the decarbonisation of the electricity grid, we're still a long way off not being dependent on fossil fuels. So transferring data causes emissions. Add to this that websites have been getting much heavier with heavy code and tech backing them up, with lots of tracking, lots of data scraping, lots of personalized advertising, and redundant content. The huge efficiency gains made by data centers highlight how disappointing it is that websites still continue to get heavier in the way that they are. So we as people who use websites, we have very few options when it comes to actually making decisions based on the environmental impact of a website. When we go to buy a new electrical good, we have an efficiency rating. When we go to the supermarket, we can buy local produce or produce that isn't wrapped in plastic. And we don't have many options, but we still have some. With websites, we don't have any. Therefore, we really rely on the owners and builders of websites like the company that I work for to do things the right way. But the great thing is we can measure the environmental impact of a website with just a few data points. And once we know that, we can start to implement ways of reducing those emissions. So if an organization is looking right across the full spectrum of ways to reduce the environmental impact of their site, then it's going to also be faster to load, it's going to be easier to use, and it's going to be cheaper for the company to both host and maintain. And what are some of the solutions? What are some of the ways in which we reduce the emissions? We can read about those more on my blog, but they're mainly related about the design, the content, and the tech of the website. But I suppose raising awareness of this issue and other environmental issues is really my rallying cry to you today. And from a website perspective, that might simply be putting a badge on the website to say the emissions caused by it, or it might be the posting of a blog to explain the improvements you're making. But the environmental impact of the digital industry is a good place to start, but I think we should be thinking bigger than that. We need to be talking to decision makers in your companies about the environmental impact of the whole company and that you work for. So organizations, they do listen to their employees, right? I wasn't asked to look at the environmental impacts of websites by the company that I work for, but they are really supportive because it's something that they realise I should be leading on. And also, I made enough noise within the company that I was also given an additional job to look at the environmental impact of the entire group. So there I work on our carbon reporting, our supplier audits, our offsetting of historical emissions, our partnerships, the talks, the educational talks that people come in to give us, match leave for climate action, support of internal green teams, etc., etc. Organizations also listen to market forces and watch what their competitors do. And institutional investors and shareholders are already starting to really hold companies to account for their environmental issues. Ask your organization, what do you love about the planet, and start to form some a common ground with other people in the organization. Ask how many emissions are we responsible for, both directly and indirectly? How are we going to raise awareness of that impact, and how are we going to own that impact? How are we going to reduce and offset what cannot be completely removed? And how are we going to keep up with competitors, because there's a whole bunch of different companies doing amazing stuff in this area. So find other people in your organization that are passionate about the climate and the ecological emergencies. Get together and collectively ask, how do we get involved in this in our company, and how do we help lead on it? On a project level, that could be as simple as talking about something like carbon budgets. So every project in an organization will have a financial budget. Why doesn't it also have a carbon budget? Also, in terms of projects, success measures in the way that projects are measured for their success. Those have to start considering the impact that the project has on the planet. In the digital industry, we're obsessed with trying to keep people on a site longer, trying to make them look at more pages. But if we look at that through an environmental lens, should we really be encouraging people to read another article or watch another video? Instead, shouldn't we really be asking ourselves, what was the task that person came on the website to do? Did they do it as quickly as possible so they can get on with their life, get off our website, and most importantly, did they do that task whilst keeping their emissions to an absolute minimum? So people shouldn't be expected, I don't think, to turn off their passions and their moral compasses when they get to work. Personally, you can reduce your digital environmental emissions in a number of different ways. So you could use Ecosia, not Google. You could cut down your social media use. You could block cookies. You can block ads. You can unsubscribe from emails, which is very, very satisfying. You could send way less emails. So a study recently showed that sending one less thank you email per day for every person in Britain over the course of a year saves as many emissions as 80,000 flights from London to Madrid. Don't stream Ultra HD, despite an exponentially large file size. You can't tell the difference. And really look after your phone or your laptop, your tablet. Use it until it breaks, and then get it fixed. You know all these things though, right? Mainly those things are good for your mental health, and they're good for your relationships, they're good for your productivity, they're good for your wallet, but now you also know they're good for the planet. So to fulfill your potential though, to positively impact the planet, think about what you have the most agency over. So where can you have the biggest impact? Harness your inner Danny Van Kooten, and hopefully you'll find something out there that lies within the 40 plus hours a week that you spend working. Other people in your workplace, they will care about the climate and the ecological emergency. Show your combined passions to your organization, and they will be serious about sorting out their impact on the planet. If they're not interested from a moral perspective, try again from a different perspective. So they will be interested when the next customer asks, how are you reducing the impact of your products and services on the planet? They'll definitely be interested when the next investor asks, why don't you have an environmental policy, and walks away if you don't. And they definitely will be interested and want to do something about it when people start leaving the organization or stop applying for jobs because the organization's values aren't aligned to those that are needed for the sake of everything that lives on this planet. Thank you.
Thank you, Neil. Next up, we're going to hear from Tom Greenwood about something quite unusual, but definitely a topic that needs to be talked about a bit more. Tom is going to talk to us about eating shit tomatoes and how our most valuable assets are the things we flush away. Tom is the co-founder of sustainable digital agency Whole Grain Digital and a self-confessed hypocritical environmentalist. He's obsessed with natural health and sustainable living, from the low-tech things like barefoot running and whole foods to high-tech renewable energy and electric vehicles.
For the past 20 years, I've been trying to figure out how to live a sustainable life. And today I want to talk to you about something that we all love and how it relates to the sustainability of the world that we live in. Food. But I also want to talk to you about something that we don't love quite so much. Poo. Our culture is obsessed by food. We have TV shows about food. We love going out to restaurants. We look forward to our meals every day. We even have food porn all over Instagram that we drool over. And yet, where our food goes and where our food comes from is something of a taboo. And you're never allowed to talk about poo at the dinner table. But these two things are inextricably linked. We can't get away from it. And today I want you to think about a somewhat challenging question. Could human waste provide the food security of the future for generations to come? Think about that. The United Nations has said that we only have enough topsoil to last until 2075. That's only 55 years away. After that, there's going to be no more soil with which to grow food. This is one of the most urgent and serious issues facing humanity, and yet it's hardly being talked about. Part of the problem is industrial agricultural practices, eroding topsoil. But that's just part of the problem. Another part of the problem that's even less talked about is the little porcelain throne that's in all of our bathrooms, that we're flushing away nutrients on a daily basis. See, the nutrient cycle in nature is really, really simple. Plants grow, animals eat them, animals poop, and plants grow. And so the cycle goes on. The problem is that when we invented the flushing toilet, although it had many great hygiene benefits, we broke the nutrient cycle. And now we need to fix it. 7 years ago, my wife and I did something that a lot of our friends and family thought was a little bit mad. We ripped out the only toilet in our house and we put in a composting toilet. It's not exactly a design masterpiece, but it's really, really functional. And we've learned a lot from it over the last few years. And it occurred to us that Our garden is now one of the very few places on Earth where topsoil is actually increasing. And it's increasing really fast. We've harvested over 2 tons of our own poo. That's a big pile of shit that's now sitting on top of our garden, and it continues to grow. But it's not just soil that we're collecting. We're getting food from it. We're growing our own food, but we're getting food for free as well. We've got tomatoes growing as weeds in our own garden. Last year, we harvested over 1,000 tomatoes that we never even planted. They were tomatoes that we ate the year before, and then they came up, and we ate them again the year after. It's like magic. And here's a picture of me holding a focaccia, looking very proud that we've used our own shit tomatoes to make it. We've literally closed the loop on our own poop. But it's not just poo. Urine as well is really, really valuable resource. It's actually got almost the same chemical profile as chemical fertilizer. And that's not a coincidence. The manufacturers of chemical fertilizer know that in nature, liquid fertilizer comes from urine. And so effectively what they're doing is they're emulating that. And so every year we're spending billions of pounds purchasing chemical fertilizers that damage our soils, when at the same time there are billions of humans literally pissing away money and nutrients on a daily basis. There's a reason that some people call urine liquid gold. And it's potent stuff. NASA did an experiment where they found that they could grow tomatoes hydroponically using nothing more than urine diluted in water. And look at this picture of my friend Dennis, also looking rather proud next to his sunflower that won his local sunflower growing competition. Let's just say that it was well fertilized. Sadly, this isn't normal. Every day we're flushing away not just our future soil, our future fertilizer, but also perfectly good drinking water. And the problem is not just that we're flushing it away, but when we flush it away, we mix it with all sorts of things that we never want to come in contact with our food. We're mixing it with domestos, Silit Bang, bleach, and all the other things that flow down the gutters and drains into the sewers, such as engine oil and industrial chemicals. Our sewage plants do a great job of cleaning out the water that goes into it, but the nutrients that go into it are often irreversibly contaminated. Around the world, a lot of sewage gets dumped in the oceans. A huge proportion of it goes to landfill, and what does get put back on the land is contaminated with chemicals and heavy metals and even pharmaceuticals that we really don't want in the land where we're growing our own food. This is a problem that we need to solve. So what do we do about it? Well, we need to return to the way that humans have always been. We've always done things in balance with the nutrient cycle. In the Korean War, American soldiers were rather bemused when they found that the Korean villagers would try to lure them in to their outhouses to use their facilities. They thought they were slightly strange people, but actually they were just wise. They knew that the Americans were carrying within their digestive systems very valuable nutrients that they could use to grow food for their families in the future. There's a lot we can learn from this. So what do we do in our everyday choices? Well, we can install a composting toilet at home. They're very easy to fit, and you could even put one in the garden if you don't want to have one in the house. If you're not in a position to do that, you could have one on an allotment, on a boat, or even in a camper van. And if that's out of the question, you can use your urine. Dilute it 10:1, put it on houseplants or in the garden. I'll just leave you to think about how you collect it. And if that's not for you, well, take a pee behind a tree or do a dump in the woods and give something back to nature once in a while. Our most valuable resources really are the things that we flush away. The bottom line is that to have a bright future, with plenty of food for everyone, we need to take care of our own shit.
Wow, thanks, Tom. I believe that things are about to get much greener next spring. Next, we're going to hear from Kate Hamer. Kate is a climate reality leader, marketing and digital consultant, entrepreneur, lecturer, and girl guiding leader, and serial recycler. Kate said that their climate reality training made her more aware of the devastating impact our actions have, not just locally, but on our fellow citizens globally. However, she's optimistic about the future, and she's going to talk to us about eco-COVID and how we can continue to reduce single-use plastic despite the pandemic.
Hi everyone. When lockdown first started and I would go out for my government sanctioned exercise every day, I was really enjoying walking along the Thames and looking at how the water was becoming clearer. There was less rubbish on the foreshore. I live under the Heathrow flight path and there was obviously less traffic going overhead, so the air felt clearer. And I really felt that nature was getting quite a respite while we were stuck indoors. Let me show you some of the pictures that I took while I was out and about. So that picture on the right, normally you'd be seeing traffic cones, shopping trolleys, various things in there, but it was really looking beautiful. But then as lockdown started to ease, people were going out for picnics, pubs were serving drinks in plastic glasses. It really changed considerably. These are some pictures of walks that I would go on during May time. It does frustrate me that people manage to take all of this stuff in carrier bags, but yet couldn't take it home in carrier bags. But I think it takes one person to put a carrier bag by the bin and then everybody else just copies. Fly tipping actually went up 300% during this time. Now, obviously, there are things that are unavoidable during this time. We have to wear masks. All these perspex screens have been created to separate people in shops and restaurants, etc. They're not single use, but I'm not entirely sure how they're going to be disposed of eventually. The UK brand perspex saw a 300% growth in their production during this time. And then there's things like ordering shopping online. Tesco's deliveries grew by about 50% from March to May, and all of those are now having to use carrier bags for delivery. So obviously we're creating more plastic in that way as well. Now, you could say that some of this has been offset by the reduction in air travel and people driving around, etc. But unfortunately, that's also had a negative impact in that it's driven down the price of oil, which has meant it's been cheaper for people to use virgin plastic in their production rather than recycled plastic. So we've generated even more as a result of that as well. So as I said, there are things that we can't avoid, but today I'm going to take you through reducing, reusing and recycling to see how we can mitigate the impact of this pandemic and our plastic use on the future of the environment. So if we start with reduce, as I said, we can't avoid having to wear masks, but unless we're working in a medical environment or on certain airlines where they require you to have sort of surgical grade masks, you're perfectly fine using a reusable one. You can wash it within your normal laundry. It's perfectly hygienic. You don't need to worry about that. We've also seen a 40% drop in the purchase of loose produce, so people buying loose fruit and veg or meat and fish from the counters in supermarkets. Again, there's no proof that this is more dangerous. You can obviously cook the meat and fish, you can wash any produce that you buy, and by doing that, that's also going to reduce the amount of packaging that we use in. Packaging has grown by 5.5% during this time, and it's led by plastic. Another thing, obviously, on the packaging front is that a lot of us have been at home and have been making our sandwiches or salads or hummus or whatever, and we've seen that it's actually a lot easier than we thought it was. So making more things that you can from scratch and avoiding the packaging that way is another way to reduce our impact. Obviously, we need hand sanitizer when we're out and about. We need to be making sure we're keeping our hands clean, but buy it in a big bottle and then refill a smaller portable one rather than buying multiple portable bottles. Again, takes more plastic out of being needed. And some people have talked about gloves. Again, lots of gloves are being found in the sea, same as the masks. which incidentally, if you do have to use a disposable mask, make sure you cut the straps at the sides and firmly put it in your bin. So hopefully it won't end up in nature, but if it does, no creatures are going to get tangled up in the straps of it. But from a glove point of view, again, no evidence that you need to be wearing gloves. Just keep washing your hands and you'll be fine. So in terms of reuse, one of the biggest things that we need to be reusing are coffee cups. So 2.5 billion disposable coffee cups are used and thrown away in the UK every year. And obviously with the lining that they've got, they can't be recycled. So using your own disposable coffee cup is really key. At the start of lockdown, some of the coffee chains did stop allowing people to use these reusable cups, but Starbucks and Costa now will. You literally put it on a tray or in another mug and they take it, so it's all contactless in terms of them filling your drink. If you're in a cafe that refuses to do that, then just order your drink in a mug and you can pour it into your refillable cup yourself. Greenpeace did a study on this with 119 experts across 18 countries, and they all found that there's no risk to be using refillable cups during this time. And cutlery is another thing. Some restaurants even have started using disposable cutlery. Rather than do that, you can easily get a pouch of your own cutlery, bamboo, metal, whatever, and take that with you. You know it's clean, you can take it home and put it in your washing up. And again, you're saving some of the disposable stuff that you might otherwise have used. So finally, in terms of recycling, the most dangerous thing for recycling is the hopeful or the wishful recycler. And I'm sure we've all done it, where you stand in front of the recycling bins, you've got something, you think, oh yeah, that should be fine to be recycled in that bin. But actually, if you put that in there and it isn't recyclable, it will contaminate the entire batch of recycling. So there is a website that you can check called recyclenow.com. And you can basically put anything into this website and it will tell you how you can dispose of it. So definitely worth checking that if you are in doubt about things. There are 40,000 different types of plastic, so it's no surprise that we don't know what can and can't be recycled. One of the big things that we need to address is plastic bottles. So 35.8 million plastic bottles are used every single day in the UK. And only 19.8 million of those actually make it to be recycled. So definitely, if you're out and about and you're not using a refillable bottle, make sure you take the bottle home or to somewhere that it can be recycled rather than putting it in a standard rubbish bin on the street. Other things to know during this time, if you've got soap pumps, the bottle of the soap pump can be recycled, but the pump itself can't. So either put the pump into a new bottle or it is going to have to go in the bin, unfortunately. Trigger spray bottles of like disinfectant, the whole thing of that can go in the recycling, that's fine. Make sure with any plastic or with jars or any sort of containers that you've cleaned them out before you put them in the recycling as well. It makes it much easier to get them recycled back to what they were originally if they've not got residue of food and things in there. It used to be the case that no black plastic in terms of like meat and fish trays could be recycled. That was because the lasers on the belts weren't able to identify it to pick it up at the recycling plants. There have been improvements to lasers, so definitely check on your particular council's website to see if you're now okay to recycle those types of things. And then I mentioned at the start the amount of carrier bags that we're using. They can't go in standard plastic recycling, but there are usually places to recycle them at your local supermarket, or if you are getting online deliveries, you can actually give them to the driver and the driver will take them away and recycle them back at the store that they came from. So hopefully those are some useful tips. I think it's important to say as well that it's much better to do something than nothing. You know, don't feel overwhelmed at this time. There's obviously lots of stuff that we're having to deal with in terms of this pandemic. So just doing a little bit is going to make a difference. But the fact is that COVID will eventually disappear, and a lot of this plastic that we're creating is going to last forever. So we really need to try and reduce, reuse and recycle as much as we can. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Kate. Next up, we have Ollie Birch. Ollie is a communications strategist with a background in sustainability. He has worked in advertising, branding, and PR nearly always with a focus on engaging mainstream audiences around complex issues like climate change. He has worked with sustainability leaders from both small brands and large international companies and NGOs, including the United Nations Climate Change Secretariat, Unilever, and IKEA. He's fascinated by the psychology of sustainability and what really motivates people to change their behavior to be more sustainable. And that's exactly what he's going to talk to us about now.
So I'm obsessed with how you get people to listen to and care about climate change and other sustainability issues. A lot of the speakers today are talking about choices. I'm talking about how to get people to make those choices, because those choices matter. In 1970, we had almost all of the technology and all of the knowledge that we needed to understand climate change and to solve it. But since then, more than half of all human climate emissions have been emitted. The truth is that most people don't care enough to change. And that's a hard pill for a lot of us who work in sustainability to swallow, but it's true. If I take the example of my own country, the UK, 88% of people say that they believe in climate change, but only 17% really think it will affect their lives. And if you look at the behaviours that they're actually prepared to take, not in a survey, but if you look at what they'll actually do, they won't really do much. If you're watching this, then you probably care about sustainability. You may even be involved in it professionally. So you might have seen this for yourself, whether you're trying to persuade someone to buy something differently or whether it was a family member. So here's why it's so hard to get people to listen and to care and what you can do about it so next time you have more success. The first thing to remember is just because people don't get it, it doesn't mean they're bad. If you start if you start judging someone, or at least if they can see that you're judging them, you're going to have a really hard time persuading them. Because they're not bad people. They've got a lot going on in their lives, People have a whole list of things, from their mortgage to picking up the kids from school, from everything else, that are day-to-day issues pressing on them that make sustainability issues like climate change, they're going to take the back seat. So if you're going to get it sort of on the front seat on an issue that they're actually going to think about and care about and listen to you and change, you've got to start with the psychology of it. And the first thing to understand is that as a species, we're really not set up to deal with climate change. In fact, if you wanted to make an issue up, if you wanted to make something that we were really bad at tackling, you'd probably come up with something like climate change. Because we're good at the concrete, we're good at the here and now. If there's a sort of tiger in the jungle, well, I'd probably get eaten. But, we know how to respond to that kind of threat, that immediate threat. But something that's indistinct and intangible, and it's happening slowly over time, like climate change, we're really bad at dealing with that. So right from the get-go, we've got an issue that's really tough for us to think about and to deal with and to take seriously in the way that we need to. And that's before you get into the more complicated things, before you get into the fact that our brains prefer experience over data. You can tell me as many statistics as you want, point to as many charts and graphs, but I will never find them as persuasive as something I've experienced. And if you look at patterns in belief and concern around climate change around the world, spikes in belief, spikes in concern often happen after extreme weather events. Now, that weather event might not have been caused by climate change. It might, be only really related. But the fact is, that's what makes people believe. That's what makes people care enough to change, is that personal experience. And most people haven't experienced climate change personally. So that's a barrier to overcome when you want to persuade people to care and to change. Another big barrier is psychological distance. This is the sort of cognitive phenomenon, a gap between where I am or where any person is and other things in the world. And the further that distance is, the further away we feel from something, the less likely we are to act on it. And if you think about climate change in particular, of any of the sustainability issues, there's a lot of ways that it's psychologically distant. It's happening in the future. It's not happening now. I mean, it is happening now in some places, but it's not happening now in my day-to-day experience. And it's often happening sort of somewhere else in the world to sort of people that I don't necessarily know. And there's this whole risk, like maybe it won't happen. And all these things increase psychological distance. And the bigger the distance, the less likely people are to really care, the less likely they are to act. When you think about that classic climate change communication, sort of a polar bear stranded on an iceberg. That's sad, and it will make people feel sad, and it might even make them donate money, but it's not going to make them change their lives, because that polar bear has nothing to do with their day-to-day lives. You couldn't get something more distant from most people than a polar bear. It's literally in the Arctic. And when you begin to think about how sustainability has been communicated, you can see more of the things that put people off or make it harder for them to care. The language and imagery used to communicate sustainability is just not appealing to most people. When you think about where it started, with science and governmental language, and then we've thrown into sort of corporate jargon, you've got a sort of a word soup that couldn't be less appealing to people. And then from there, as it sort of moved into people's day-to-day lives, or moved into some people's day-to-day lives, the early adopters were people who lived quite alternative lifestyles. And there's nothing wrong with that, but it's not very attractive for a lot of the mainstream. Sustainability has become associated with hippies, to put it bluntly. And that's not something most people aspire to be. Now, the world might be a better place if they did, but they don't aspire to be that. So sustainability has been coded, framed in such a way that's not really appealing to a lot of people. People still associate it with those things that they don't really want. I mean, the most ridiculous example of this is with men. So sustainability and climate change have been communicated in ways that a lot of men perceive as being sort of effeminate or feminine. And so some men don't want to act or live in more sustainable ways because of that. It's ridiculous, but it's true. So what can you do about it? 3 steps to make people listen and care. The first is start with the personal people you're trying to persuade. What are they like? What do they care about? How do they look at the world? If you can frame a message that fits with that, you'll be more successful, even if you don't really agree with that frame of the world. If they care about money, make it about money. If they care about their family, make it about the family. There are lots of examples of this working. So when the Pope came and talked about climate change and he framed it all in biblical language, Catholics were far more likely to care. They were far more likely to act. And if we look at sort of one of the groups that's least associated with acting, one of the most resistant to sort of acting on climate change, people from the sort of conservative background in the US, people on the right wing, well, the moment you frame climate action and climate change around in-group loyalty and preserving national heritage and things like that appeal to that audience, well, guess what? They're far more likely to act. So if you start here, start with the people you're trying to communicate with. At the very least, you won't fall into the trap of making it sort of feel irrelevant to them. And most likely, you'll be far more persuasive. 2, bring it closer to home. Break down that psychological distance. Relate the issues and actions to things that feel close to them, things that they can deal with on a day-to-day basis, their lifestyle, their neighborhood, their country, things that are close to them. Finally, marry it into a simple story. Don't bludgeon with facts. Graphs or stats can explain something, but they can't really make people care. People like anecdotes and emotions. So draw on experiences they can relate to and keep it simple. Focus on just one issue or one aspect of something bigger and the simple actions that people can take. People are not going to become paragons of sustainability overnight. But once they've taken a step, they don't usually backslide. And if you can get them started, they might take the next steps themselves. Hopefully this gives you a few tips to do that. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Oli. We came to our final talk with Troy Carter. Troy is a co-founder of Rhizome and is bringing the audacious scale and vision of startup methodology to the planet's ecological and climate crisis. He graduated from Stanford University with a degree in economics and was one of the early employees at Airbnb. He has focused on carbon finance and renewable energy and agriculture projects for the past 6 years. He is now supporting Rhizome to grow into a globally significant climate-positive building materials and carbon sequestration company, and he's going to talk to us about regenerative cities.
Hi, my name is Troy Carter. I'm a co-founder at Rhizome, and we're pioneering bamboo-engineered lumber as a climate-positive alternative to wood, steel, and concrete. Most people, when they're walking around in their daily lives, don't actively think about what the buildings they are in are made of. All over equatorial regions of the world, I'm thinking India, Bangladesh, Indonesia, Sub-Saharan Africa, Latin America. These are regions where most of the world's population growth is going to happen over the next 40 years. And if all the buildings that are built in these areas are built out of concrete and steel, we're going to hit some major climate thresholds that we really don't want to hit. So how do we avoid that? One, we can build with wood. Wood, when you chop down a tree, that carbon goes into the built environment and is sequestered for a really long time. And that works pretty well in North America and Scandinavia and Western Europe, where we have well-regulated forests, pretty good tracking systems, and sustainable forestries. We're doing pretty well. That's just not the case in the global south and in equatorial regions, where over the past 50 or 60 years, there's been almost 100% deforestation. Wood won't be an option for most of these countries to build the number of buildings that they need. So there has to be an alternative. That's what we're pioneering at Rhizome. So bamboo engineered lumber is really amazing. It's a climate positive building material, which means the more that you build with it, the better the climate impact. So the more CO2 that's drawn down from the atmosphere into the built environment. It's also super strong, at least 2.5 times the strength of wood, a better strength weight ratio than steel, regenerative, so it means when you cut a piece of bamboo down, it just grows right back. And it's also really fire resistant, so it's great for building large buildings. So this is called mass timber. Just think, 60-foot long pieces of wood, 2 feet thick, 8 feet wide, really large pieces of engineered lumber that can sequester a lot of carbon and are really technically sophisticated. So they're beautiful and they're also strong and feel really good to be in. So how do we make bamboo engineered lumber? One, we work with local co-ops all around the world. Right now we're operating in the Philippines, and over the next decade, this will go global. We make small boards out of this large round pole, and we glue them or laminate them into pieces of plywood or boards and dimensions, just like you would see at Home Depot. One of the major inflection points that we'll be reaching soon is where bamboo is actually at price parity with wood. It's also an incredibly effective carbon sequestration technology. So bamboo sequesters carbon 10 times faster than trees. So you can imagine a 3-year-old Douglas fir, which is, a few pencils thick and, 4 or 5 feet high. A 3-year-old Dendrocalamus giganteus bamboo, it has multiple 6 to 12 inch poles, 80 to 120 feet high. So it's a really order of magnitude difference in the growth rate of bamboo, which is one of the fundamental reasons why countries that otherwise would not be able to have lumber industries in a sustainable way now can have sustainable bamboo industries. Our goal at Rhizome internally is to sequester 10 gigatons of carbon by 2050. And in order to do that, we'll need to plant more than 1 million hectares of bamboo and build more than 1,000 processing facilities around the world, basically to create a reliable supply chain just the way the lumber industry has over the past couple hundred years. So what can you do? So there's a couple things that come right now, and most people are not making active building decisions. And if they are, look for sustainably harvested wood or bamboo engineered products. Those are really great. There's also low CO2 concrete and renewable energy produced steel that are also starting to come online and will become more and more prevalent over the next decade. But the biggest thing that came to me in a recommendation for this audience is the actual process of working in climate. How do we actually use our energy and our life force to work on an issue that is one of the biggest themes of the decade? And for me, that meant becoming a climate entrepreneur. So founding a company, raising money, building a manufacturing company in an industry that I did not have previous experience in. Climate is a huge problem, and the bigger the problem, the smarter the people that you can attract, the more committed, passionate, heartfelt, and fun people. It's a great area to work. So if you're on the edge of working in investment banking or working in some traditional industry, consider working or starting a climate-oriented business. It's a really great choice. What you choose to spend your time on matters, and it probably matters more than who you vote for. It matters more than how you spend your money, or it matters more than sort of the individual consumer level choices. But what we commit our careers to has long-term lasting impacts. So with that, I just want to leave you working climate. It's really fun. Reach out if you have any opportunities for collaboration with Rhizome or myself. And think about the sort of buildings, homes, cities you want to live in. They should be good for the planet. We don't have to just reduce harm. And most of the conversation is about just reducing humanity's harm on the planet. And I believe we can change the conversation so that the more we build, the better the ecological impact. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tori. That was the final talk of this session, Everyday Choices Part 2, and therefore the final talk of our events at 24 Hours of Reality Countdown to the Future. We hope that you found it interesting and motivating and that you've learned something new and you feel inspired to take action. I want to challenge you to continue the conversation even after this event with your family, your community, your friends, and your colleagues. You'd be surprised how many people care about sustainability. So do reach out and talk about climate change, because after all, it's one of the best things we can do. Before we finish, I wanted to share with you this image of our planet, the blue marble as they call it. This is our home, our only home, despite what Elon Musk may have planned for us. In fact, just to put it in perspective, this is an image of Earth from Mars. Now, I don't know about you, but that seems like a hell of a journey to me. Many people say that we need to protect the planet, that the planet is in danger, but I don't think that's true. If you think about it, the planet was here before us and it will be here after us. So by making sustainable choices and creating a sustainable future, we are protecting our future on this planet for us and generations to come, so that one day we don't have to move to Mars, because it really seems like an awful place to live. I'd like to finish with the words from John Lewis, who sadly passed away this summer. He said, "We may not have chosen the time, but the time has chosen us." And I think that's relevant to this topic as well. I really think it's so powerful and so true. We are the ones who have the power to really change things now, to change the world, to create a better future. And I think that that's amazing, and we should all be up for that challenge, because the world really does depend on it. Thank you so much for listening, and if you enjoyed this event, please consider donating any amount to Building Malawi. It's a charity that our company Footprint Digital works very closely with, and we are currently in the process of planting a forest in Malawi with local children and local communities. And it would be great if you could support us. I promise you that 100% of all donations will go straight to the people in Malawi who we work with. Thank you so much, and enjoy the rest of your weekend. Bye.